Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about why attempting to isolate a muscle or do single joint exercises actually produces inferior muscle growth, inferior muscle fiber recruitment, less strength, and higher risk of injury. And it's important that we understand this. Let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And I'm going to break this down because I have a lot of new subscribers. Subscriber count's been going up. I mean, we broke 100,000 within the last 6 months, right? 6 or 7 months. And it's continued to go up. And so there's a lot of new people here, and these are things that they need to understand. And I'm going to get to the injury thing in a minute because that goes back to a conversation that Clint Darden and I had on my Facebook the other day, where he was pointing that out, that a lot of coaches feel that way about single joint exercises, and they won't let their athletes, whether it's strongman competitors or football players and stuff like that, do them because they feel that it causes higher risk of injury when they're actually competing in their sports. And I think there's a certain amount of anecdotal evidence you guys can see even in YouTube Fitness with that, right? Yeah. Anybody you guys can think of who's been hurt multiple times just showing off trying to do semi-athletic stuff? Yeah, there's some of those out there. It's because they do all these isolation movements. It's a big factor, particularly when they're on drugs. So we come over to the point, though, about overall growth. There's a point of overall growth. Now, a lot of people will say things like, well, I feel like my biceps need more work. Okay, fair enough, your biceps need more work. Doesn't mean that you need to attempt to isolate them. Doesn't mean that's necessary to make it grow. You can do more chin-ups. All available research shows that chin-ups, weighted chin-ups, will recruit more bicep muscle fibers than any sort of curl you can come up with. Now, people would argue, well, there's too much systematic recovery, so I need a smaller exercise. Okay, fine. Find a smaller exercise, but you shouldn't be attempting to isolate the muscle. Big movements, multi-joint movements, are generally going to put more muscle on you. They're going to activate more total muscle fibers. And what people need to understand, there's almost no muscle in the body that gets maximum activation from only one joint moving. All right, you need to understand that. People say, well, what about the bicep? And I'm not talking about the supination and pronation of the wrist because that doesn't have a training effect. Right, the bicep, people are like, well, right, it bends the elbow here, right? That's what it does, it bends the elbow. But it also does this. So if you're just curling with your elbows tucked in at your sides, a strict curl, you're not actually performing all the functions of the bicep. There is a function of the bicep involved with shoulder rotation. One of the heads, the way it inserts, isn't fully activated unless you get the forward movement. That's why people do that. That's why you feel naturally inclined to do that. That's a good thing. That is your natural movement pattern when you curl, if you're attempting to use your bicep, is for you to want to move that shoulder forward. That's why everyone does it, and they have to be taught by bodybuilders to unlearn it, because that's part of the movement pattern. Triceps, long head of the tricep, without shoulder extension happening, it doesn't get fully recruited. The elbow alone doesn't do it, right? These are little bitty muscles that we're thinking of that people would attempt to isolate. The multi-joint component is required for maximal muscle activation of almost every muscle. So the point we come to, let's go right there to those two exercises. Are you isolating the muscle? Are you doing a single joint exercise the moment you get shoulder movement involved? No, you just turned it into a compound movement. And you also increased the range of motion. You added another function to one of the heads of the muscle. Therefore, if you were to be objective and you were to set aside all the bodybuilding bullshit and dogma and all the silly shit that they teach you people in their magazines and their videos with all their moronic bullshit, if you set that to the side and you were to just look at the bicep, and if you'd never seen any of that stuff and you were to just look at data, look at biomechanics, would common sense and just looking at it tell you that the bicep's going to get more recruited doing this or doing this? You no longer are doing an isolation movement. Every single aspect of human anatomy would tell you that that would recruit more muscle in the bicep. The bicep is doing more work. All right, same thing with the tricep. Same thing with the tricep. When you look at it from that perspective, it becomes obvious that these people don't know what the hell they're talking about who are telling you all this stuff of locking things like your shoulders into place and just bending the elbow. I mean, it's the same thing when we talk about The quads, the hamstrings, right? Hip extension versus just knee extension and knee flexion. The hip is involved with quadricep and hamstring recruitment. In other words, a single joint exercise cannot maximally recruit them. And I'm not even going to get into the whole mind-muscle connection thing because that's a different topic. There's plenty of data on that too, that mind-muscle connection doesn't even produce the best muscle fiber recruitment. When we hook up EMGs, there are ways that are superior to that. So much for that bullshit. That's a whole nother topic, though. I'll cover that again later. It's been studied. Let's come over to the injury thing. Why do a lot of coaches not want you to do that? Because it's not natural movements. And if you're training an unnatural movement pattern, what happens when you need to actually do something in the real world? Let's say you get strong. All of you out there realize if you do a bunch of weight training, you're going to get a lot stronger, right? Even if you get on a bunch of silly ass machines, do a bunch of isolation movement, you're still going to get stronger, right? Bigger muscle is a stronger muscle. Undeniable fact, proven with dozens and dozens of studies. You're going to get stronger. All right, when you have strength and you now have trained unnatural movement patterns, what happens as far as a playing field? What happens if you get in a fist fight or have to wrestle or grapple, or you have to grab something heavy in an emergency, or someone falls and you catch them, or you fall down and catch yourself, or you rappel down the side of a cliff doing rock climbing, stuff that bodybuilders seem to get hurt really bad every time they attempt to do lately online. These movement patterns are our normal movement patterns. All these different things that we do that are multi-joint in nature, it's your natural tendency to do that with your bicep, right? You bring other muscles in, and what happens when loads, whether it's falling and catching something, catching someone, hitting someone, grappling, punching, kicking, anything, again, hitting someone on a playing field in football or rugby. These loads, when we turn everything into multi-joint, what happens? And we recruit multiple muscles, we distribute the load across multiple tendons more. So the amount of force that's hitting you, or you're catching or falling or crashing into in any situation, you can fall down and roll down a hill, is to use as many muscles as possible. We do that to be efficient. That is our normal human movement pattern. Our nervous systems are designed to work that way. It actually reduces injuries, right? We are more likely to be successful in applying the force that we want against whatever we're doing. And that force gets distributed across more joints and more tendons in the body when we do anything to where we use as many muscles as possible. What happens when you train yourself to attempt through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of repetitions to try to move a single joint and recruit a single muscle? It trains a movement pattern to do that. It requires you to unlearn your natural tendencies, because you notice you have to actually learn to do that stuff because it's not normal. It's not a natural movement pattern. Now you've trained yourself to do that. When you get in these situations, you're actually more likely to get hurt as a result of it. We should be attempting to use as many muscles as possible on any movement pattern that we do. Yeah, you're going to build more muscle because you're recruiting more muscles in the gym. It doesn't reduce the amount of tension being placed on that, right? It doesn't reduce the amount of tension on a muscle. If you can lift more weight or particularly through sometimes a longer range of motion because you're adding more muscles to an equation, does that mean that the other muscles involved in the bigger movement aren't contracting maximally? Of course they are. Maximum exertion equals maximum muscle recruitment, right? Plenty of studies looking at this. You're going to gain more muscle, but you're also going to have a lower risk of injury, because if you're trying to isolate muscles, you are training unnatural movement patterns that produces higher injury rates when you actually have to do something in a real situation to where you have to push against an awkward object, or you fall, or you catch someone, or you hit someone, or something happens, like rappelling down a cliff, rock climbing, right? You're going to reduce your chances of getting hurt if you don't do these silly things. They're stupid. It's literally moronic to attempt to isolate a muscle. It's literally moronic for every possible outcome you could possibly think of, whether it's muscle growth or just not getting hurt. And that needs to sink in. People need to understand that. That's an important fact here. All right, guys, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.